What if you had a shortcut to, well, sharper judgment, especially when the stakes are, sky high?
Mm.
Imagine being able to see challenges coming, make the right call every single time, and make sure every flight is successful, not just safe, even before you leave the ground. That's really the power we're trying to unlock today.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing a deep dive into the real core of safe flight operations, aeronautical decision-making, risk management, and human factors.
And we're pulling this straight from the source, Chapter 2 of the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. This isn't just theory.
Hmm.
For you, the pilot, or maybe someone learning to fly, this is about practical tools, things you can actually use to make good decision-making second nature, really, through every part of your flight.
Exactly.
It's that mental framework that honestly separates a decent pilot from a truly great one.
Totally agree. Our mission today is really to equip you with those frameworks that the pros use, day in, day out. We want to help you understand not just what to do when you face a tough choice, but why these methods work. And crucially, how you can apply all this to your own flying. Right? From that first pre-flight check to, well, every moment in the air, right until you're safely parked. Get ready for maybe a few aha moments that could honestly change how you approach flying. Okay, so let's unpack this. The core concept. Aeronautical decision-making, ADM. It sounds, I don't know, a bit formal maybe, but what are we actually talking about here, and why is it such a huge deal in flying safely?
Well, what's really interesting is that ADM is fundamentally a systematic way of thinking. It's a deliberate approach. It's about consistently figuring out the best thing to do, the best course of action, given whatever circumstances pop up during flight operations.
Okay.
Think of it less like a rigid set of rules and more like a sophisticated mental toolkit. It's not just about the mechanics of flying the plane, It's about making smart, informed choices from the very beginning when you're just thinking about the flight, all the way through to shutting down safely. It's kind of the cognitive glue holding a safe flight together.
And the why behind it, the importance, it really hits home when you think about the environment pilots work in. It's pretty unique, not very forgiving.
No, not at all.
In everyday life, you make a bad decision, maybe you're late, you burn the toast, pick the wrong queue at the supermarket. Annoying, right?
Yeah.
But in aviation, like the handbook says, the margin for error is thin. The consequences of a bad call they can escalate incredibly fast, tragically fast sometimes.
Precisely. And that brings up a really important question. How do we as pilots actually make that aeronautical environment safer? The answer really lies squarely in using ADM effectively. It gives you the power to manage that environment better, reducing risks not just for yourself, but for your passengers and really anyone on the ground too.
Right.
It's a skill that goes way beyond just following procedures or checklists by rote. It demands a deeper kind of engagement with what's actually happening around you.
Which leads us to a really significant shift in thinking, almost a revolution that the aviation industry has gone through. For ages, if an accident happened and a pilot's actions were involved, it often got slapped with the label pilot error. Kind of simplistic, maybe even unfair sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Historically, that was very much the default. Pilot error was, convenient, but often incomplete. It was used to describe accidents where a pilot's action or maybe their decision was a cause or a factor. That included just failing to make the right choice. But that approach, it often just smoothed over really complex situations. Now, the modern understanding leans towards something much more accurate, more comprehensive, human factors related. And that's not just changing words. It's a fundamental shift in how we look at safety.
Okay, human factors related. That sounds much more nuanced, more, productive, frankly. What exactly does that cover, and how has understanding that changed how we approach safety?
Well, human factors digs into research about how humans actually work. Our abilities, our limitations, our characteristics, especially in specific situations like flying or maintenance, stress, learning, all that stuff.
Right.
And then that knowledge is systematically applied to how we design things. Tools, machines, systems, tasks, jobs, even the whole environment. The goal is to make human use safe, comfortable, and effective. For instance, understanding how a pilot actually perceives information on a screen or how fatigue messes with reaction time. That directly influences how an instrument is designed or how flight duty time rules are set up.
So it's about the whole system, not just the person.
Exactly. The whole aviation community benefits. It helps us understand how people can do their jobs most safely and efficiently, and crucially, how to improve the tools and systems they interact with. It's about understanding the human system within the bigger aviation system, rather than just pointing fingers at one person for one mistake.
So it's not just about isolated mistakes, but the whole context, the bigger picture where those mistakes happen. This connects perfectly to the chain of events theory. The handbook mentions Dr. Patrick Raylette's article, Accident-Prone Pilots, and this really telling story about Captain Everyman. Can you walk us through that? Show us how small things can pile up.
Absolutely. The chain of events idea is so powerful because it shows that accidents almost never happen because of just one bad choice or one single error. Instead, it's usually, like the source says, a series of events, and the resultant decisions together form a chain of events leading to an outcome.
Like dominoes falling.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Captain Everyman's story. It's a perfect example of this compounding effect. First, he had a gear-up landing. Okay, that right there points to a lapse in decision-making or maybe procedure. A mistake happened.
Right, one link in the chain already.
Yeah.
And hopefully a chance to learn something.
You'd hope so. Unfortunately, after that, Captain Everyman had another accident. This time while taxiing a beach baron out from the ramp. And here's where the chain really becomes clear. He got interrupted by a radio call from the dispatcher.
Ah, distraction.
Yep. And because of that momentary distraction, he forgot to finish the fuel crossfeed check before taking off. He was flying alone, and he left the right fuel selector in the crossfeed position.
Okay, seems like a minor oversight maybe. Easy to do when you're distracted, maybe stressed from the last incident too.
Exactly. A minor thing, potentially. So once he's up and cruising, he starts noticing the plane wants to roll to the right. He corrects it with aileron trim. But what he doesn't realize is that both engines are now sucking fuel from just the left wing's tank. So the right wing is getting heavier and heavier.
Oh, wow.
He missed a critical check. Then he misinterpreted the symptom, the roll tendency, which just made the underlying problem worse. When you're in a high workload situation, especially maybe after a previous incident, your brain power is already kind of taxed, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That makes us more vulnerable to these kinds of errors. It just shows how a seemingly small oversight, mixed with the distraction and then a wrong interpretation, can build link by link into a really critical, dangerous situation, all because one check was missed.
That's a really powerful story. It makes you ask, how does this whole shift in understanding from just blaming pilot error to looking at human factors and this chain of events, how does that change how we train pilots?
Oh, it changes everything, fundamentally.
Yeah.
You have to recognize that, pilots are drawn from the general population and exhibit all types of personality traits. We can't just assume pilots are somehow immune to human error, to distractions, to stress, or to making bad decisions sometimes.
We're all human.
Exactly. So it's absolutely vital that good decision-making skills be taught to all pilots, not just as some abstract theory, but as practical, ingrained habits. This understanding shifts training beyond just stick and rudder skills. It's about cultivating critical thinking, proactive risk assessment, self-awareness, especially in these dynamic, high-stakes environments. It's about building resilience, building defenses against those chains of events starting in the first place.
Okay, let's get practical then. We understand why good decision-making is so vital and how our view of error has changed. Now, for you, the pilot sitting in the cockpit, how do you actually do it? This is where these models and checklists become, well, indispensable tools. Let's start with the 3P model. Perceive, process, perform. Sounds like a loop, almost instinctual.
It really is designed that way. The 3P model is meant to be this continuous cycle for effective decision-making, a constant mental feedback loop. As a pilot, you're always perceiving potential hazards, processing the situation, figuring out what it means, and then performing the actions needed. And the key thing is it's dynamic. It allows for those on-the-fly adjustments because, let's face it, the flying environment is never static. It's about staying vigilant and adaptable, constantly scanning and updating.
So let's start with perceive. This is about spotting hazards, right? Obvious ones, subtle ones. And to help do that systematically, we have the PAV checklist, a really well-known tool. What's its main job for a pilot?
PAVE is fantastic. It's a proactive tool designed to help you systematically list hazards associated with all aspects of the flight.
Right.
It forces you to ask that basic but critical question. What could hurt me, my passengers, or my aircraft?
Right.
And it breaks down potential risks into 4 key areas: pilot, aircraft, environment with a V, and external pressures. The beauty of PAV is it reminds you that all 4 of these things interact, creating a unique risk picture for every single flight. If you neglect even one, you could be compromising safety.
Okay, let's take the first P in PAVE, pilot. This is about you, your personal readiness. I imagine this can be one of the toughest things to judge objectively about yourself. The handbook mentions the IMSAFE checklist here. What kind of things do you need to perceive about yourself?
Yeah, self-assessment is hard but crucial. You need to be brutally honest about things like illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotion. That's the MSAFE checklist. For example, the handbook points out how things like late nights, just general pilot fatigue building up, or even the effects of flying above 5,000 feet for a while.
Right, hypoxia.
Even mild hypoxia, exactly. It can make pilots less discerning, less critical of information, maybe less decisive, more compliant, more likely to accept risks they normally avoid.
Mm.
It really highlights how your physical and mental state is a huge, often overlooked hazard.
So PAVE prompts you to check that before you even start up.
Before you start, and importantly, it encourages you to keep checking it during the flight, because how you felt at the beginning of a long cross-country might be very different from how you feel 3 hours later approaching your destination.
Okay, next up, A for aircraft. This is more than just the walk around pre-flight, right? What deeper questions should we be asking about the plane itself and whether it's right for this specific trip?
Absolutely. You need to really evaluate the aircraft's capabilities, its limitations for the mission you have planned. It's not just, is it airworthy, legally speaking, but is it the right tool for this job today? So you ask questions like, can this aircraft actually carry the planned load? Passengers, bags, fuel, given today's temperature and altitude. That's huge. Can it operate safely at the altitudes needed for this route, considering mountains or weather? Does it have enough fuel capacity with the required reserves for every leg? And a really important one, did the fueler actually put in the amount of fuel you ordered? Does it match the gauges?
Yeah.
It's also about assessing the whole pilot aircraft team, Are you and this specific plane capable of the mission together? You might be a very experienced pilot, but if you're flying an older plane with no advanced weather gear, your ability to handle IMC is still basically zero, regardless of your personal skill.
Makes sense. Then we have V for environment. I'm guessing weather is king here, but what else fits into this category?
Weather is definitely a primary concern, yeah. And you should always have your own personal minimum set for weather, conditions you just won't fly in, period, even if it's technically legal VFR.
Like minimum visibility, cloud ceilings?
Exactly. Minimum Vs, ceilings, maximum crosswind you're comfortable with. But the environment also includes terrain mountains, flatlands, airspace complexity, runway conditions. Is it wet, short, contaminated, even lighting for night flights? When you check the weather, you need to look at everything available, forecasts, current reports, and think about how it impacts your flight, staying strictly within those personal minimums you set. If the forecast looks borderline, that should be a big red flag.
And finally, the E in PAVE, external pressures. This feels like where things get really slippery because these pressures often come from outside the plane, but they can really mess with decisions inside the cockpit. It's not just pilots, is it? We all deal with this.
You nailed it. It's a human thing. These are factors like get-there-itis, that powerful urge, sometimes subconscious, to just get where you're going, no matter what the weather's doing or how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Or peer pressure, maybe friends or other pilots subtly making you feel like you should push on. Or maybe organizational pressures if you fly for work feeling like you have to meet a schedule. These things can quietly, or sometimes not so quietly, warp your decision-making, lead you to make choices you know aren't safe.
So acknowledging them is the first step.
Absolutely. Identifying these pressures proactively, just admitting they exist, is critical to lessening their sneaky impact. It takes real discipline to say, nope, not today, it's not safe.
Okay, so we've used PAVE, we've systematically perceived the hazards, listed everything that might go wrong. The next step in the 3P model is process, evaluating those hazards. And for that, we use the CARE checklist. How does CARE help us sort through those perceived risks?
CARE helps you process the hazards you found with PAVE by looking at their consequences, exploring alternatives, facing the reality of the situation, and considering external factors again, but this time with a deeper, more analytical focus. It's about digging into each risk you identify to really understand what it means and what could happen. It's a structured way to think through the problem.
Let's make this concrete with the example from the handbook. Gail's flight. What was her situation? What hazards did she perceive initially using PAVE?
Okay, Gail's scenario had several big hazards stacking up which should immediately raise concern. She identified her own inexperience and lack of recent flight time. That's pilot risk. Then, the mission involved travel over mountains on a hazy day. That's environment. And her destination was an unfamiliar mountain airport that is still in IMC conditions. Also environment. And a huge red flag for a VFR-only pilot. That combination alone is serious.
Okay, let's apply care. First, see consequences. What happens if Gail just pushes on with this plan?
The consequences are pretty stark, frankly. The handbook states, Gale's inexperience and lack of recent flight time create some significant risks for an accident, primarily because she plans to travel over mountains on a hazy day and land in an unfamiliar mountain airport that is still in IMC conditions. An inexperienced VFR pilot flying into clouds over mountains. That's a classic setup for spatial disorientation, flying into terrain you can't see, CFIT, or losing control. Any of those could easily be catastrophic. The haze hides the terrain. The IMC removes all visual references. It's bad news.
Okay, very serious consequences. So, A, alternatives. What could she do instead to mitigate those risks, to break that potential chain of events?
She has good alternatives. The source suggests she might mitigate the pilot-related risk by hiring a certified flight instructor, CFI, to accompany her and provide dual cross-country instruction. That immediately adds experience and safety. Plus, it's a great learning opportunity in safe conditions.
Smart.
Other options include simply postponing the trip until the visibility improves, waiting for the environment to get safer. Or she could modify the route to avoid extended periods of time over the mountains, maybe taking a longer but flatter, less demanding route. It shows she has choices other than just forging ahead.
Then, our reality. This sounds like the step where you stop kidding yourself.
Exactly. The reality check forces you to be objective. It confirms that yes, hazy conditions in mountainous terrain clearly create severe risks for an inexperienced VFR-only pilot. This isn't about hoping for the best. It's about acknowledging the cold, hard facts of the situation. Don't downplay the danger just because you want to make the trip. Face the objective truth of the hazard. And finally, external factors, again, they really do pop up everywhere, don't they? Underscores how powerful they can be. They really are. That pressure is often subtle but strong. The handbook reminds us, few pilots are immune to the pressure of get-there-itis, which can sometimes induce a decision to launch or continue in less than ideal weather conditions.
Right.
This is a critical moment for self-awareness.
Yeah.
Gail might be feeling it, maybe people are waiting, maybe it's an important meeting. Just acknowledging that pressure is the first step to resisting it. Care forces her to look at these pressures again, but now weighed against the real consequences and the available alternatives.
And it's crucial to remember, like the source points out, even if Gail's plane was in perfect shape, excellent mechanical condition, and she knew the avionics well, those other factors, her inexperience, the weather, the terrain, still create huge risks. The plane might be fine, but the overall situation isn't.
Absolutely. The aircraft assessment for Gail might show low risk for the plane itself, but that doesn't cancel out the other high-risk factors. You can't just isolate one element. A perfect airplane doesn't make up for an unprepared pilot, bad weather, or external pressures pushing you too far. It's the whole picture that matters. That's what these models help you see.
Okay, so we've perceived with PAVU, processed with care. The final step in 3P is perform, taking action. And for this, we have the decide model. This is a pretty well-known model globally, right, for actually doing something.
Yes, decide is recognized worldwide. It gives you a logical sequence for taking action. Detect that something has changed or isn't right. Estimate the need to react. How significant is this change? Choose a desirable outcome. What do you want to happen? Identify actions that could lead to that outcome. Do the necessary actions. And finally, evaluate the effect of your action. Did it work? It's a clear roadmap for responding effectively when things are happening fast.
So it's designed for dynamic situations, which flying definitely is. It also helps distinguish this deliberate process from what you might call automatic decision-making. What's the danger there? Why can just reacting on instinct sometimes be risky in the cockpit?
That's a really important point. Decide is crucial because while that automatic decision-making, the stuff that feels instinctual comes from training, muscle memory can be super fast and effective in routine situations. It can lead to really bad errors if your initial assumption is wrong, or if the situation is even slightly different from what you trained for or expected. The handbook gives a really great example of this trap. A twin-engine failure scenario where the pilot instinctively feathers the left engine.
Okay, but wait, isn't that what you're supposed to do? Feather the dead engine in a twin to reduce drag. Seems like the right quick reaction.
It sounds right, but here's the catch. In that specific example, it was the right engine that actually failed. The pilot feathered the left one automatically based on common training assumptions.
Why the left?
Historically, on many light twins, the left engine is considered the critical engine. It has to do with aerodynamics, specifically something called P factor, basically. One side of the propeller produces more thrust than the other. On most twins, if the left engine fails, the resulting asymmetric thrust is harder to control with the rudder, making it critical. So during training, instructors often emphasize left engine failures more because it's the toughest scenario.
So, the training drilled in a specific fast response for a left engine failure, which led to the wrong action when the right one failed. The brain defaulted to the familiar pattern, not the actual situation.
Exactly that. The pilot's brain, wired for the common high-risk scenario, automatically applied the wrong fix when a slightly different problem occurred. And this isn't just about engines. It's a huge lesson in how our training and assumptions can sometimes trip us up if things aren't exactly by the book.
Wow.
It really forces you to question that muscle memory sometimes and actively engage the detect and estimate steps of decide, even when you feel you need to act instantly. You have to confirm what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Now, it's true many modern twins have counter-rotating props, which eliminates that critical engine factor. But the underlying lesson about automatic responses remains incredibly relevant. You need to detect and estimate accurately before you act.
Okay, building on all these decision tools, there's a broader concept, single pilot resource management, or SRM. What's that all about? How does it tie everything together?
SRM is defined as the art and science of managing all the resources, both onboard the aircraft and from outside sources, available to a single pilot to ensure the successful outcome of the flight. It's an art because it takes judgment, flexibility, creatively pulling different pieces together. It's a science because it uses systematic models and skills you learn.
Okay.
Essentially, it's about taking the ideas from crew resource management, CRM, which was originally developed for airline crews with multiple pilots, and cleverly adapting them for the single pilot who has to do it all themselves. You don't have a co-pilot to bounce ideas off or share the workload with.
So, what are the main ingredients of SRM? Sounds like it pulls together a lot of what we've covered, but maybe structures it differently.
It absolutely does. SRM is kind of an umbrella concept. It includes ADM, which we just talked about, risk management, RM, proactively finding and dealing with hazards, task management, TM, effectively juggling all the things you need to do in flight, automation management, AM, knowing how and when to use the autopilot and other systems, controlled flight into terrain, CFIT awareness, staying constantly vigilant about hitting obstacles, and maintaining solid situational awareness, knowing where you are, what's going on, where you're headed.
That's a lot.
It is. SRM training helps you keep that vital situational awareness by managing automation, aircraft control, navigation tasks effectively. It helps you accurately assess risk, manage it, and make good, timely decisions. It's like the pilot's comprehensive personal safety system.
And for SRM, there's another handy checklist. The 5 Ps. What are these 5 things every single pilot needs to keep checking?
The 5 Ps are 5 critical variables that constantly impact your environment and your decisions. The plan, the plane, the pilot, the passengers, and the programming, meaning automation. The idea here is to move beyond just reacting to problems by encouraging a scheduled, proactive review of these key areas at critical points during the flight.
So it's about integrating risk management proactively.
Exactly. Not just waiting for something to go wrong. It gives you a structured way to mentally scan your whole operational environment on a regular basis.
Let's quickly touch on each P. First, the plan. Seems fundamental, right?
The plan is everything involved in your pre-flight planning. Your route, the weather briefing, your mission objectives, and it emphasizes that crucial point. The easiest point to cancel a flight due to bad weather is before the pilot and passengers walk out the door and get in the plane.
Makes sense. Less pressure, then.
Way less pressure. You're on the ground, comfortable, have all the info. You can make a sound decision, maybe come up with a backup plan without the stress of being airborne or feeling committed because you already started. And rechecking the plan at key points like before takeoff or starting descent is just as vital.
Then the plane. We talked about airworthiness, but what else falls under this P in SRM?
The plane is a thorough review of its airworthiness, yes, but also its performance capabilities for today's conditions and the status of all its equipment. Is maintenance current? Can it handle the load at this density altitude? Enough fuel with reserves considering winds? Are all the systems you need, especially nav and comms, working correctly? It's making sure the plane isn't just legal, but truly fit for this specific flight.
Okay. Next, the pilot. Back to self-assessment again, but maybe with ongoing checks.
Yes, the pilot is that continuous self-check. Are you still fit to fly? The source warns again about fatigue, stress, hypoxia, how they can make you less discerning, less critical, less decisive, and more compliant and accepting of risk. It's a constant reminder to use that IMSAFE check and to recognize that your guard might drop, maybe especially as you get closer to landing, which is often a high workload phase. The 5P check helps you spot these issues in yourself and adjust, maybe get help, change plans, or just consciously increase your focus.
And the passengers, how do they fit into SRM? It's not just about their weight and balance calculation, is it?
No, not at all. The passengers considers their comfort level, their experience with flying, and importantly, how they might influence your decisions. Are they anxious? Are they pushing you to get there? Their expectations can feed into that get-there-itis we mentioned.
Yeah, subtly or not so subtly.
Right. As PIC, you need to manage their expectations, keep them comfortable and informed, but firmly ensure their presence doesn't pressure you into unsafe choices. They can be a resource for simple things, like spotting traffic, but they are not part of the decision-making process.
Good distinction. Finally, the programming. This seems directly aimed at modern cockpits with all the tech.
Exactly. The programming is all about the automation, the avionics, the GPS navigation settings. How well are you managing these complex systems? Are they helping reduce workload and increase safety? Or are they becoming a distraction, a source of confusion, maybe even making you complacent?
It's about being proficient.
Totally. Being proficient with your GPS, your autopilot, knowing their quirks, their limitations, knowing what they're actually doing at all times, not just blindly following the magenta line or letting the autopilot fly without supervision.
And the 5P check isn't just a pre-flight thing, right? It's meant to be used throughout the flight.
Crucially, yes. The 5P concept relies on you doing a scheduled review of these critical areas at key decision points. The handbook suggests pre-flight, pre-takeoff, hourly or at the midpoint, pre-descent, and just prior to the final approach fix, or entering the pattern for VFR. This structured, ongoing approach keeps risk management front and center and helps prevent you from getting caught out as things change.
Okay, so we've got ADM, the 3P model, SRM, the 5Ps. All these tools seem to feed into this bigger idea, risk management. And it's not about getting rid of risk completely, that's impossible in flying, but about being really proactive, right?
That's exactly it. The whole point of risk management is to proactively identify safety-related hazards and mitigate the associated risks. It's baked right into ADM. It's not some separate task. When you use good decision-making practices, you're inherently managing risk, reducing it, controlling it, maybe even eliminating certain risks altogether.
And how do you get good at that?
Well, your ability to manage risk comes from a mix of things. Your own direct flying experience, lessons you learn from other pilots' experiences, and solid training and education. It's about consciously engaging with the potential dangers, not ignoring them.
The handbook lays out 6 formal steps for risk management. Can you walk us through those?
Sure. These 6 steps provide a really solid framework. First, identifying personal attitudes hazardous to safe flight, recognizing those mental traps like we discussed. Second, learning behavior modification techniques to fight those attitudes. Third, learning how to recognize and cope with stress, because stress kills good judgment. Fourth, developing risk assessment skills using tools like the risk matrix. Fifth, using all available resources, internal and external, super important. And finally, sixth, evaluating the effectiveness of one's ADM skills, always learning, always improving. It's a continuous cycle for getting safer.
You mentioned the risk assessment matrix. How does that tool help a pilot actually evaluate risks systematically, go beyond just a gut feeling?
The risk matrix is a visual aid, usually a grid. It helps you evaluate 2 things about any hazard you've identified, the likelihood of it actually happening and the severity of the consequences if it happens. You plot these on the grid. So the example in the book involves finding a nick in the propeller blade. The pilot judges the likelihood of a problem from that nick as occasional, maybe not super likely, but possible, but they judge the severity, if it did fail, as catastrophic. You put those together on the matrix, and bam, it falls right into the high-risk area. That tells you, deal with this now.
That seems clear, but I bet it's not always that straightforward. What one person thinks is occasional or catastrophic might be different for someone else, like a really experienced pilot versus a brand new one looking at that same prop nick.
You've hit on a really key point. It can be subjective. It's heavily influenced by your own experience, your training, your knowledge base. Take that prop nick again. A really seasoned pilot, maybe with maintenance experience or deep knowledge of props, might look at that specific nick, its location, its shape, and know from experience that it's unlikely to cause a major problem. They might assess it as low risk, maybe needing monitoring, but okay for the flight.
Because they have more context.
Exactly. They understand the nuances. But the inexperienced pilot, they might only know the general rule. Prop damage is bad, could be catastrophic. They don't have the deep knowledge to differentiate types of damage. So, faced with uncertainty, they quite rightly assess it as high risk and cancel the flight.
So both decisions could be considered good based on their perception of risk.
Precisely. Both pilots made a decision based on their perceived risk, shaped by their experience. The matrix helped structure that thinking, forces you to articulate why you see it that way. But yeah, experience plays a huge role in the assessment itself.
So risk management isn't just something you do once during pre-flight, it's ongoing.
Absolutely essential.
Mm.
You have to integrate risk management into planning at all levels, not just before you start the engine. Because risk is an unavoidable part of every flight. Things change, weather shifts, maybe you get a weird engine reading, a passenger feels sick. Safety demands you're constantly using risk management skills, not just in the planning phase, but actively throughout the entire flight.
The handbook also mentions 3 different time frames for risk management. What are those?
Yeah, these cover different situations. Deliberate risk management is when you have time, like during initial flight planning or when reviewing procedures. You use experience, brainstorming, checklists to identify hazards and plan controls. Think of it as the deep planning phase.
Okay.
Then there's strategic risk management. This is more about applying existing standard operating procedures or training protocols, making sure the established best practices are being followed routinely.
Right.
And finally, tactical risk management. This is the on-the-fly stuff, that quick mental or maybe verbal review you do during the flight itself when something unexpected happens or the situation changes. You're applying the basic risk process right there in the moment. All 3 are crucial for safety at different times.
Let's shift gears slightly and talk about something many of us struggle with, flying or not. Hazardous attitudes. Those sort of ingrained mental traps that can really mess with judgment and lead to taking unnecessary risks.
Oh yeah, recognizing these attitudes in yourself is absolutely the first most critical step because often they're working below the surface. They're just habitual ways of thinking that if you don't check them can really compromise safety.
What are some common examples mentioned in the handbook? How do they show up in the cockpit?
2 big ones, really classic, are invulnerability and macho. Invulnerability is that feeling of it won't happen to me.
We've all felt that, probably.
Right. People think accidents happen to other people, the unlucky ones, the unskilled ones, but not me. Pilots thinking like that. They're way more likely to take chances, push the limits, increase risk because they feel somehow bulletproof. The dangerous kind of denial.
And macho. Sounds familiar from, like, bad driving behavior. How does it apply to flying?
Macho is that I can do it attitude, often tied to needing to prove something. Pilots trying to show they're better than everyone else. They might take risks in order to impress others, or just to show off their supposed skill. Maybe flying into questionable weather, attempting tricky maneuvers they haven't mastered.
Trying to look cool, basically.
Pretty much. And while it's often stereotyped as a male thing, the handbook specifically says women are equally susceptible. It's really about ego and being hyper-aware of how ego can negatively influence your decisions.
These attitudes, plus the stresses of flying, can really ramp up the pressure. How do pilots manage stress effectively when clear thinking is absolutely critical?
Yeah, stressors, as the book calls them, can definitely increase a pilot's risk of error. They can be external, like weather, or internal, like personal problems piling up. The absolute key strategy for managing stress in the cockpit, and probably in life too, is stop, think, and analyze before jumping to a conclusion. There is usually time to think before drawing unnecessary conclusions.
Don't just react.
Exactly. Hasty reactions under stress, almost always bad decisions.
There's a great anecdote in the source about a cabin door opening in flight, comparing clear weather versus bad weather. Really shows how context changes everything.
It's a perfect example. Imagine climbing through 1,500 feet, clear sunny day, and pop. The cabin door on your Mooney swings open. Okay, it startles you for sure, but you quickly realize it's not a serious emergency. Maybe noisy, inconvenient. The stress level probably drops pretty fast.
Right, manageable.
But now imagine that exact same thing happens. Door pops open, but you're in solid IMC. At night, maybe in turbulence, maybe dealing with a slightly rough engine already.
Right.
Suddenly, the stress level goes through the roof.
Yeah, completely different ballgame.
Totally. That drastically different context makes a huge negative impact on your ability to handle even simple tasks, let alone the complex ones you need to be focused on. It just hammers home how context amplifies or reduces stress, and how important it is to manage your perception of the threat.
So when things get overwhelming, stress is peaking, what's the immediate advice? How do you regain control?
The advice is clear. When a work overload situation exists, a pilot needs to stop, think, slow down, and prioritize.
Right.
You have to consciously break that panic cycle. Figure out what's most important right now. Delegate if you can maybe ask ATC for help, or even have a passenger handle a very simple task if appropriate. Put the situation in perspective.
Just take a breath.
Take a breath, remain calm,
Oh.
think rationally, even for just a few seconds. It can massively reduce stress and dramatically increase your ability to fly safely. But doing that, it really depends on your experience, your training, your discipline to actually use those techniques when you need them most.
And finally, in this segment, the idea of use of resources. The source mentions internal resources, but broadly, what does it mean to use all resources available?
Right, well, the text provided doesn't detail internal resources further. The concept of using all resources is fundamental. It's one of those 6 core steps of risk management. It means leveraging everything you've got. Your internal resources are things like your training, your knowledge, your experience, checklists, your personal minimums. But it also means effectively using crucial external resources, talking to air traffic control, getting information, asking for help, using automation appropriately, consulting charts, airport directories, even sometimes using passengers for simple, non-critical tasks, like looking for traffic in good weather, or maybe reading a checklist item if you're overloaded. It's about realizing you don't have to solve every problem entirely on your own. Maximize everything available to enhance safety and reduce your workload.
All right, final segment. Let's talk about common operational pitfalls. These are those dangerous traps pilots can fall into, often leading to accidents, things we really need to watch out for. What are some classic ones?
A really classic and incredibly dangerous one, especially for VFR pilots, is called scud running. This is when you're trying desperately to stay visual with the ground, flying really low underneath clouds when the actual conditions are IMC instrument meteorological conditions.
So flying VFR when you really shouldn't be.
Exactly. You're literally ducking under clouds, maybe dodging hills or towers you can barely see. It's trying to fake VFR and IMC, which is just incredibly risky if you're not instrument rated and current.
Yeah.
And even if you are, it's usually a terrible idea.
And related, but maybe even more sudden, is continuing VFR into instrument conditions. Sounds like flying right into a wall of cloud unexpectedly.
Yeah, and the dangers there are immediate and severe. The big risks are spatial disorientation or collision with ground obstacles. Happens incredibly fast. If you're not instrument rated or current, flying into a cloud means you lose all visual reference. Your senses will lie to you. You might think you're level when you're actually in a steep bank or dive.
Terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
Pilots can become completely disoriented within seconds, lose control, or fly straight into terrain they never saw coming. It's a major cause of fatal accidents for VFR pilots.
Another common pitfall, and I think this happens outside aviation too, is getting behind the aircraft. That feeling of being constantly overwhelmed, playing catch-up.
Oh yeah, getting behind the aircraft means you're allowing events or the situation to control pilot actions instead of you being in control and anticipating.
Right.
You often see it as a constant state of surprise at what happens next.
Reactive, not proactive.
Exactly. Instead of thinking ahead, planning your next few steps, you're just reacting to things as they pop up, often frantically. It leads to a downward spiral, especially in the cockpit, where things happen fast, you get overwhelmed, make mistakes, get further behind. It's like trying to bail out a boat that's sinking faster than you can scoop.
Now, let's switch to technology. Advanced avionics are everywhere now. How does this change the game, and what skills do pilots need to manage this tech safely? The cockpit looks way different than it used to.
Oh, dramatically different. We've gone from steam gauges, those round dials, to these incredible electronic flight display EFD systems. You've got the primary flight display, PFD, right in front of you. The big multifunction display, MFD, often in the middle.
Glass cockpits.
Glass cockpits, exactly. They can present information much more clearly, less clutter. Theoretically, they improve safety too, because solid-state instruments fail way less often than the old mechanical ones. So much information is right there.
But all that tech demands new skills, right? What are the key flight management skills needed to use these advanced systems effectively, not get buried by them?
There are 3 really essential skills, kind of the new stick and rudder for the digital age. Information management, automation management, and risk management specifically related to these avionics. You absolutely need these to really leverage the technology safely.
Let's start with information management. With these screens showing so much data, it seems easy to get overloaded. Information blindness, almost.
That's the real challenge, especially when you're new to glass. The handbook says the PFD, MFD, all those colorful menus and submenus can sometimes seem to offer too much information. You might feel like you're drowning in information but unable to find a specific piece you actually need right then.
Like finding a needle in a digital haystack.
Pretty much. The sheer volume can actually hide the critical stuff, paradoxically, leading to a loss of situational awareness if you're not careful.
And there's that specific trap mentioned, the magenta line trap. What's that about?
The magenta line. This is such a great illustration of a cognitive pitfall. The source describes a pilot whose navigational information management strategy consists solely of following the magenta line on the moving map, just blindly following that colored line from the GPS.
Seems easy enough.
Too easy, maybe, because that pilot can easily fly into geographic or regulatory disaster. What if that direct GPS course takes you right over high mountains you can't climb over, or straight into restricted airspace, or into unexpected bad weather? Or what if the GPS display fails?
Right. The line doesn't know everything.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool, but it is not a replacement for looking at charts, understanding the airspace, having situational awareness. Just blindly trusting the line without thinking about where it's actually taking you is super dangerous.
So how do you manage all that information effectively? Keep your situational awareness sharp when using these systems.
Good strategies include always double-checking the system. Did you put the right destination or waypoint into the GPS? A single typo can send you way off course. And critically, use verbal callouts, even for single-pilot operations.
Talk to yourself.
Basically, yeah. Saying out loud what you see, what the automation is doing, what your next action is. Okay, autopilot is capturing the glide slope. Altitude alert set for 5,000. It forces your brain to actively process the information, not just passively stare at the screen. It keeps you engaged, like having a virtual co-pilot.
Okay, next skill. Automation management. These systems offer different levels of automation. Is there skill in choosing how much to use and when?
Absolutely. Advanced avionics give you multiple levels of automation, from strictly manual flight to highly automated flight. And the key is, no one level is appropriate for all flight situations. Your job as the pilot is crucial. You must know how to manage the navigation displays like the CDI, the nav source, GPS, VOR, and especially the autopilot.
Know its modes, its limitations.
Exactly. You have to know the peculiarities of the particular automated system being used. Otherwise, you can get distracted, confused about what mode it's in, or let it fly you into trouble. Relying too much on it can also make your own manual flying skills rusty, which is bad if you suddenly need them.
And finally, risk management, specifically with avionics. What's the bottom line for pilots about this technology?
The absolute bottom line, the critical reminder is, EFDs do not replace basic flight knowledge and skills. They are a tool for improving flight safety, not a substitute for good old-fashioned airmanship. In fact, the risk actually goes up when the pilot believes the gadgets compensate for a lack of skill and knowledge.
Thinking the tech makes you invincible.
Right. Thinking, oh, the GPS will get me through this, or the autopilot can handle this really bad weather. That's a dangerous mindset. You have to remember there are limits to what these systems in a typical light GA aircraft can do. They aren't magic.
So the pilot is still ultimately responsible.
Always. Being pilot in command requires sound ADM. Sometimes that means making the tough call to say no to a flight, even if the fancy screens seem to suggest it might be possible. And risk also shoots up when you fail to actively monitor the systems. If you become detached, just letting the automation do its thing without constantly checking what it's doing, and if it makes sense, you've basically outsourced your thinking. And that's a recipe for things going very wrong. #HadOutro.
Wow. That was really insightful, a deep dive into the pilot's mind, truly, and those critical decisions made up there. We've covered so much ground, the vital role of aeronautical decision-making, that systematic approach. We dug into the 3P model: perceive, process, perform, and those essential checklists like PAVE for spotting hazards and CARE for thinking them through.
And the decide model for taking structured action, including that really interesting caution about automatic decision-making, how our instincts or training can sometimes lead us astray if we're not careful.
Yeah, that twin engine example was powerful. Then we broadened out to single pilot resource management, SRM, and its 5PS, plan, pilot, passengers programming. That idea of scheduled check-ins throughout the flight, constantly managing resources.
Right, and how to manage risks using tools like the risk matrix, understanding likelihood versus severity, and how our own experience shapes that view. We talked about those hazardous attitudes and vulnerability, macho, and how to recognize and fight them. Plus, the absolute necessity of managing stress effectively, remembering to stop, think, and analyze.
We also hit on those dangerous operational pitfalls: scud running, flying VFR into IMC, getting behind the aircraft and how quickly those situations can deteriorate. And finally, navigating the world of advanced avionics, focusing on those key skills: information, automation, and risk management for the tech, warning against just following the magenta line or thinking the gadgets make up for poor skills.
Yeah, and if you pull all those threads together, what really stands out, I think, is that the human element is still absolutely central. Even with all the amazing technology, the most important, most reliable tool in that cockpit is still the pilot's brain. Disciplined, trained, thinking critically. The tech is there to help you, not replace you.
So the big question for you, the listener, is how do you take all this?
Yeah.
How will you proactively train your own mind, that ultimate cockpit tool to perceive, process, and perform better, ensuring a lifetime of safe and hopefully enjoyable flying? It really comes down to a commitment, doesn't it?
It really does. We'd strongly encourage you. Go back and look at your personal minimums. Maybe even tighten them up a bit after this discussion. Actively practice these decision-making models: PAV, care, decide, the 5 Ps. Don't just read about them. Use them on the ground, in a simulator, even just mentally walking through flight scenarios.
Keep learning.
Absolutely. Commit to continuous learning. Always try to understand the why behind the what's. Ultimately, your dedication to these principles, to ADM and risk management, that's your best insurance policy in the sky. Fly safe, fly smart, and keep that learning curve going upwards.